welcome, one and all. Okay, it works. Yeah, apparently my stream was messing up because I had one extra character to the limitations of the title. Woohoo. All right, so let's get to it. Today we're going to go over refactoring, a word used to consider organizing our code from what it used to be. And as we grow our code larger and larger, we want to make sure we keep it clean so we can go back to it in specific places and basically make sure to clean it up when we get that chance so it's easier to manage in the future. And this is always a big detail for anyone using or coding because in the end, every single piece of code you write will be reused in the future, whether it's for learning how to sort, learning how to access the web, as we are going to do with some fetch in JavaScript, and other basic projects you add on to your JavaScript workbench that we're working on today, and in other videos. We are pretty far in this series of videos. There are others that I have that are based on the progression to how we got here. And I will leave the link to the playlist somewhere in the description once I remember where the heck I put it, because I was farting around with this. Uh, there it is. I was farting around with all of these streaming buttons. Oh, it's such a headache. It's such a headache. Why can't I just make it just one button? I made it as close to a single button to get this stuff done so I can start streaming right away. But then there's other things that get in the way, and I gotta make sure everything is synchronized and check my audio. Okay, my audio is good, so you can hear me. That's nice. It's always a good thing. Uh, so just going to add that to the description for anyone that wants to go over all the details that we've done so far in our streaming workbench, or yeah, the streaming workbench, because basically everything we do in this piece of code that we're about to go over is based on the streams that we go together. Questions get asked by viewers, we go into detail. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of detail when it comes to the information we go over, so make sure you do take the time to refresh yourself. Yo, you changed your name. What's up, Scary? Or Aqua God? What's going on? What do you like? What's that? Gosh, Namor? Are you Namor? No, Aqua God. Mm. Welcome in, buddy. Welcome in. Yeah, you were asking when I'm gonna stream again. Sorry I didn't do it yesterday. I was watching the stock markets a bit too heavy. A lot of interesting things happening in the overall economy, and I got a little carried away with the data. I would love to stream those too, but it just seems to attract all kinds of bots and all kinds of, hey, I have a crypto wallet. Like if you see some of the comments I put or I have on some of the trading videos, it's like, hey, I have a wallet. Here's my key. Da, 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 da. How do I access it? I'm like, you don't put that in the public. And also, you're a bot because you're trying to get responses. Anyway, let's see. Going into it real quick. So there is the playlist. No, that's the live playlist that I was looking for. Here's the beginner set for anyone. I mean, even when I'm not streaming Aqua, you can basically go over to the videos here in the playlist. It's got a bunch of stuff that we've gone over, depending on which streams you caught. But I've also gone into a lot of smaller details in certain smaller videos. There's like code with algebra mentality. Basically, math is not a requirement for coding, but it sure does make life a lot straightforward when you're doing effective programming. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let me pop up the chat so I can keep touch with what's going on. Let's see. Oh, doo-doo-doo. What's going? Hey, hey, welcome in. Greetings, Bishwa. I am good, my sir. How are you? Oh yeah, you started watching it. Nice. I do recommend, especially if you plan on going into There's like that's fun, the safe cracker or the safe pin cracker. There's a programming game on Steam that's pretty cool. It's called Joy of Programming. Love that game. Do a lot of really cool sort of like puzzles on programming in Python though. We're going to refactor our previous code and then also access online stuff. So we're going to basically use our web page here. Well, we have to refactor it and organize it a little bit because it's getting a little large. This is a point in time where it's good to show you how to organize into smaller files so we can basically keep things a little bit more under control. So we're going to be refactoring first to kind of organize and move these folders, these pieces of code into their own little files. And it'll be a great lesson for importing because in the end, once you learn the first 15%, the 85% is basically all about importing. Basically grabbing other people's GitHubs. If you do that, if you go into GitHub and then grab someone else's code, you can apply it to your project. Or if you're doing Python, importing. If you're doing what is it in C++? Plus plus? I forget the name. It's been a while. I think it's also importing. But basically, when you're applying someone else's code, you do a type of import to your project. And we're going to show you, at least in JavaScript, it's a lot more straightforward because all we have to do is essentially organize a little bit with our stream here. So there was just one video I wanted to show. Hold on. In the comparing, was it comparing? I was comparing three languages. No, no, that's Ubuntu, Linux, Python, JavaScript. Programming AI, Python, JavaScript. That's another one. I do have some videos I probably haven't quite put together into their own nice organized spaces, so that's not fun. Dude, hold on. I had one video that goes over a good comparison. Oh, hold on. I know how I can find it. I put that on my Patreon. A good comparison between Python, JavaScript, and C++. So that actually makes a very good sort of overall view of how those three languages really do compare to each other. Install DeepSeek, how hacking worked though, installing AI, four PCs at once, security software, remote assistance, basic tech tier. Where the heck? Oh, was that installing DeepSeek open source? Also do visit, I got a lot of interesting resources from online, everything from textbooks to my favorite open source software that can replace like Photoshop, AutoCAD, all kinds of stuff like that. Programmer guide, simulation, installing AI, Discord, Earthquake Web. Hmm. Security software. Okay, hold on. It's not in this one. It's my IT journal. I think it was about me. I think it was about me. Find me, free tutoring, demystifying this. Oh, this one's not even the right place technically. All right, demystifying. Oh, that's the one. So demystifying programming, part one. I lost my own video. Amazing. I'm not very good at organizing everything. But here's a case where I do go over C++, Python, and JavaScript side by side. And since you guys are working with the current videos of going over JavaScript with the lives that I have, you have a good understanding of what you're looking at in JavaScript. This will show you a very good comparison so you can really adjust to the basic ways that we write code. There's really like three formats, right? There's the C++ form, which is very strict. You got to make sure all your curly braces are curled, all your semicolons are at the end of each line. Then there's some keywords that we use specifically in C++ that don't get used in JavaScript, but I make those comparisons here. There's a part two and a part three as well, unfortunately. Let me see, demystifying now that I find it. Let's see if that even pops up on the main. Yeah, okay, demystifying part one. I do have, oh, there's a part two right there, very matrixy, and so on and so forth. So A good place to start expanding from just one language. All right, so let's start. So we are going to do something called refactoring. Refactoring is the act of taking code, organizing it into either nicer chunks, files that can be separated, and many times if we find a way for us to actually like take some functions, what is what, my dude? What is refactoring? Is that the question you have? Or when we're dealing with coding, we have a bunch of functions that we can maybe organize into a single class. So refactoring is the word of the day. So here's how we do it. It's nothing crazy. It's basically organizing and rewriting. In our case, I have a stream1.html that's going to basically serve as our workbench. And what I need is a folder, a basic structure adjustment. So I'm going to say stream1 for that stream1. So the stream1 folder is associated with the stream1.html. Everything I essentially expand. Ah, the previous video. So the demystifying video. I guess that's a hell of a word to spell to find it. So I got a part one, part two, and part three. This shows you comparing three different programming languages. I do the same set of code in three languages so you can see how each of those languages differ and how they are the same. Remember, the first 15% that you learn from any language, whether it's Python, C++, PHP, JavaScript, they are essentially the same concepts. They are different when it comes to the way we write them. Some keywords may be different, some commands might be different, but the logic and the meaning behind what we're doing in each language is the same. So in this one, we take a look at significant difference and similarities between C++, Python, and JavaScript. So if you have a good understanding from our streams, and make sure to follow if you haven't already for any sort of further streaming workbench creation in JavaScript, you've been basically following along with what we've been doing in JavaScript. Well, being comfortable with it, because we've already went through classes, we went through while loops, for loops, variables, now you can take a look at how C++ and Python applies those same concepts, right? I don't believe I do classes in those, but I do variables, loops, and all kinds of things like that. And I have a demystifying one, two, and three. What these videos will help with is to give you a much bigger perspective on what to look for. So let's say you're like trying to find something or some code that you want to do in JavaScript, but you only find people writing it in C++. What does this help you with? This helps you with converting other people's code in a whole different language and then putting it in your own comfortable language, JavaScript. Basically taking the way someone else coded something and then putting it in the way you like to code it, translating from language to language. That's kind of the key there. I am currently pursuing masters in data science, focusing on advanced Python and AI ML. Well, good, very good. I think I do have some AI based ones too. That's the visual, music AI and chill. That's me setting up an AI. Programming. This one was kind of a bad title, it looks like. I was streaming Marvel Rivals, unfortunately. But I do have some other ones in there. But yeah, I can go into more Python-based stuff because I do play with the AI locally on my computer. So focusing on data management with Python and data structures. That one I actually have a project that I have locally. If I open up my window here, go into my not grant code, go into my Python folder. This is all the languages I program in. It's pretty intense. So I got Python, data science here. So I got some stuff we can go over in the future here. But I'm assuming you're probably within the beginning levels of the data science or just the working with the language itself. So Python, JavaScript, 3D engines, Lua, Java, HTML, PHP. I've got a lot of pieces of code here. I do have a project that we can go over in the future where I take a Python, let me see where it is. It's a Python-based code. It's a part of the graphic user interface, and I call it Face Llama. And Face Llama basically is a uh, user window. It's a graphical user interface that communicates with Olama. So it's basically a wrapper. It's a graphical user interface wrapper, like a wraparound. They use code from one base to control the server. And we can go over in much detail, but this goes over basically user interfaces using the Qt engine, which is pretty hecka crazy, which we can go into. I have a lot of examples I wanted to go over before we get there. Here's some particular setup queries, like this is actually talking to the AI, telling it, hey, you are this, you are a AI that is attached to a piece of software, and the user will communicate to you from this software. Your name is Face Llama. You literally give the AI the kind of like gist and the setup query on what its actions are, what it should do. I've been wanting to get into a point where I give, and this is what it looks like right here. This is a very simple version of it. You chat with the AI here. You send a query to the AI. It communicates with the Olama server. Can't remember if it's Shift Enter or Control Enter. You create a thread. Oh, yeah, there we go. I gotta give it access. It creates a thread in the background because sometimes when you run certain pieces of code, it'll actually lock up the window. And then it goes, I'm an AI and I don't have feelings, but I'm here to help you. How can I assist you today? Typical AI behavior, right? So this little window I created from scratch using a Qt user interface with Python. So remember, and this is also why we start in JavaScript because we not only are we using JavaScript in the logical sense of things, using actual computer code to organize logic, we are also simultaneously using super simple user interface systems. So if I was to go over to the file, I installed something here. Let me find that file, stream one. Reveal in File Explorer, and then I open it up in the browser, we're essentially still working with user interfaces, right? So in this case scenario, JavaScript is super simple when it comes to user interfaces. But if you look at what we saw a second ago, the user interface is not nice. It's basically using functions, using this extra 85% of the code that we have to learn in order to create this window manually through the code. It's not a very nice, okay, here's a div workbench, here's an input, cool, here's a button, cool. Nothing as simple as that. I wish it was that simple, to be honest, when it comes to creating a graphical user interface. But in the case of like working pure Python and then doing a user interface, you do have a case where you can import XML files and basically achieve something similar, which is a different type of user interface. There's like so many different ways you can use GUIs or code GUIs, but I actually like Qt because it is very quick, very low resource, and very nice when you really get to work with it nicely. So this is a whole Windows window that is a user interface created from Python modules in the PySide 6 Qt widgets space. But then we have basically a HTML file that basically runs within a browser and it's managed by just HTML. So that's why I like to start with JavaScript. It teaches you the concept of a GUI, how we can take a GUI and connect it with that logic in the same file, and then after you get a good feeling for how GUIs interact with files, then like now we refactor stuff, we separate files into their own nice organized spaces, and then you start seeing how those connections still exist between that GUI and the file folders and the code and the JS logic, even though they're going to be all organized all over the place. Because that's really what's happening with our PySide Qt. Okay, so without further ado, first thing I want to do is clean this up a little bit. I have a couple of ways to consider this. First, we have the button click. Hesitant on removing button click because, in a way, logically, button click does directly reference the actual button that initiates the whole protocol. So I probably will keep button click here as a type of index to the organization of, hey, what happens after I click the button? However, we just created a couple of functions here. First is the parse input search. This is for searching the web that we created in one of the previous streams. So input search takes the text from our input box, runs a bit of a for loop to go from string to string, very big on the string manipulation part of the process. And it just opens up or at least returns the search terms and then opens up that search term in a window open. So in a way, I can probably even condense this further, but since this was the choice that I've made so far, I'll keep this pretty straight like that. However, battle was a pretty big one. The class uh, object session that we had, where we actually went over creating a full set out class player with hit points, attack, defense, accuracy, so on and so forth. Uh, then we had extra pieces or functions. We didn't really go into update equipment stats. We haven't really created a full out game out of this, just a single battle scene and then the attack method. So it grew pretty big. It grew pretty big and it's taking up quite some space. So here's how we can refactor this. First, we want to take this and move it to another location. Always keep in mind you can do this little open and close so you can organize code so it's easier to see on the bird's eye view. But the first thing we want to do, and this works with basically every type of language, is you can extract code from your main file, throw it in a directory like here. So we can kind of create, depending, maybe we'll expand on this. I'm thinking we'll expand bigger on the battle process and the gaming of that particular class in the future, just to practice object-oriented programming. But for now, I'll go ahead and call this, what kind of Gato? Turn-based. Turn-based? No, it's so generic. Call it battle. Battle object. Battle.js. Battle.js. Why not? We're keeping it straightforward. And that's a big key that you can do. The way that your main function may work, you may want to name it accordingly, so it's easier to kind of correlate, hey, that's battle.js, it contains battle. If I need to change it in the future, I will. Now, instead of having to like go all the way down like this, which you can, I like to close down the function and just highlight 2 or 3 lines below. I'll take that over, copy it, and paste it in here. And so now it's basically missing from our main file here. But that means we have to now import it. The question is, yeah, that's fine. It should be all right. The question is how we activate battle. If we activate it literally on the document starting up and running, then we'd have to place battle somewhere up here. So something like script, this is where we start importing, source, and then we have to direct it to the location we saved it. This is now going into more directory-driven location awareness. So we'll go into slash stream one. There it is. You can also get a nice drop-down menu in Visual Studio Code. And then battle.js to import that particular case. Yeah, I did do that. I did stream the sprite. This was me playing with my little well, he's not even present at the moment actually. The little chat bot that I'm trying to create. Where is he? Fathom. My little Fathom. Is he here? There he is, this guy. Shoo, the little bounty guy. Bounty baby boy. So this was just like 3 sprites, based on a repetitive loop, an infinite repetitive loop, and it just kind of repeats that. I wanted to go into more detail and add more animations to it, like him looking around and stuff. Didn't really get to that far yet on that particular case. But that is one thing we can go in further in the future is actually doing more gaming and sprite stuff, which we can also apply it to the gaming system we're creating for the Battle.js, so we can basically use sprites to control those as well. But for the case scenario, that's my little dude right there. His name is Fathom, and he's gonna essentially be a little comedic relief in the corner of the screen. I wanted to make him basically more aware of the chat, which is a little bit of extra programming that I have to do, where I have to like go into an API with the chat itself and access the chat from my own page, which there's a conflict of cross origin thing going on. So until I find a nice feasible way to get him to be like that sort of AI where you can talk What is that thing? A little Demogorgon? It could be a little Demogorgon. It's a baby Demogorgon. Mm, My goal for him is to be able to interact with chat. So basically, once I get, because I can attach an AI to him on the local server. And when you guys chat in the chat itself, it's going to parse the text, send it to him, and then basically give him like a response time. So maybe if it's like a very, like right now, it's pretty contained chat. It's not anything crazy. But in the future, if it gets very busy and very loud, then he can take a couple of sets of text and then choose who to reply to, and then it'll send it to the little local AI and parse that for you. So it's a project that I wanted to keep going on and work on, which would be pretty cool. Oh, it's totally possible. It's just a little bit complex because I gotta basically work with either using Python to manage the AI in the background or using JavaScript and the fetch that we're about to learn in this session. The fetch is going to be how I can communicate with not only local servers that I have on my computer, which will go into PHP and API creation as well. That's actually another good goal for the future. Is after we set up our little refactoring, we're gonna set up a quick fetch script to gain access to like some weather APIs online, and that will give you a kind of idea of how we communicate with outside servers. From there, I can create a local server with a PHP script that I can literally run locally. You can do it too. There's a piece of software that you can host PHP servers. And then I can run my own local API, and then we'll play around with some communications between JavaScript and the PHP. So, if you like this kind of stuff, we're going into more complex territory. I see we have a couple of extra people in chat and viewership. And please do leave a like and subscribe and the notification hit so you can see as we progress through our workbench. And we're going to go into PHP APIs and communication with servers. So that's my favorite part, honestly, is when we get into server communication where your program isn't just limited to your browser. It now can communicate outside to a MySQL server, to a PHP server, and all kinds of details in between. So, yeah, that's future projects. We're getting there. An auto reply feature. There's a feature like that in YouTube. Maybe, maybe. But it's not as fancy as my little Demogorgon on screen. Maybe they have their local AI to communicate, which that's the problem too. I have no control over what the YouTube AI is gonna talk like, so I can at least make mine a little bit snarky and funny. Anyway, so now we are accessing the files that we stored in the stream1 folder, which is corresponding to the stream1.html. Inside is a battle.js file, and now I can basically populate this stream1 folder to have whatever extra code I want to organize in there, which is good to kind of set up in this way. I might even want to go a little further because I might design this a bit further and maybe make some CSS, some images that I might use. So the better case scenario to be really proficient and organized for future expansion is to consider, is JavaScript the only type of file I'm going to need in my stream or in my HTML file? Probably not. So what I would then actually do is create another one, another folder inside of stream one and say this is going to be the GS folder, this is going to be the CSS folder. Potentially we're going to have, oh, hold on. Hold on. Wrong place. Move that file over. There we go. Potentially, we're also going to have a PHP folder where we're going to have actual PHP code server API access, and that's how we can organize all the bits and pieces. So again, when we expand into server programming, make sure you do subscribe and like so we can actually show you all the details how JavaScript communicates with PHP. And the cool thing is, after JavaScript communicates with PHP, your Python can communicate with PHP. How do languages work together to achieve one goal? It's through a server, and PHP can be that center point between different languages. It can be that um, communicator that not only talks with JavaScript, it talks with Python, it talks with a C++ program. This is pretty heavy stuff in the PHP space, and we'll get there as time goes. But right now, let me see if it's satisfactory. I'll probably want to move this to, well, actually, let's do the first case scenario. Let's do a battle real quick to make sure that's still working fine. We also don't have a user interface for the battle itself. Okay, file not found battle.js. Oh, right. I moved it into its own folder, so js/battle. Stream one JS battle.js. Oh, technically it didn't move that into there. My steps are becoming quite slow in my brain. I'm still processing copy. Okay, now it's weird. Stream one. It is interesting. It's going into the root of the drive. So notice a bit, you're gonna have to really troubleshoot shoot some things here. So right now it's looking in file iDrive, which is one of my extra drives on my computer. Stream1.js battle. But the problem is it's not in the iDrive in the root directory. It has to go into tutoring and stream. So based on certain cases, based on how you directly link, this right here might not be necessary. Slash is a very Linuxy way of saying root of the current drive. So I made a mistake here. It's not really slash, but I can do one of two things. I can do dot slash, which basically announces look in the current file or folder we're in. Dot slash is a way for us to directly tell the program, hey, in the current directory, look for stream one. And inside of that stream one, there's another folder called JS and then another file, battle.js. So it's really organized by two pieces here. The dot slash is the current directory, stream1 slash together is the folder called stream1, JS slash folder called JS, and then battle.js is finally the file that we're going to. There it is. So now we have the battle scene re-entering itself here. So player one is the victor. We still have the random factor involved. Player two, player one. Cool. We can run that multiple times. Another thing we can do is for normal cases, I really prefer the dot slash because now I can move the file all over the place. Or as long as I move stream one with the folder together, so stream one folder and stream1.html, I can copy them and paste them in totally different locations. And if I organize my directory parsing, my directory searching to be organized based on locality or dot slash, then it's always going to reference that same location that we're looking for in the current directory. The slash again is a little tricky because this is actually a Linux kind of keyword for the root of the whole drive. That's why when I had this, it was actually looking at let's do it again so I can show you. The file was not being found because it's actually looking in the root drive. It's starting at I drive and then stream one. But that's because it's kind of assuming, hey, that's just a slash. I know that Linux uses a slash as a root directory. So I'm going to go all the way back in the drive in the I location. You kind of get used to these sort of directory processes when you open up a terminal and you start moving around a bit. So ls, cd, slash, notice what just happened, right? Cd slash took me all the way back to the root directory, which is essentially like a way for saying, hey, go to the beginning, go to the root. But then I can now look inside of that directory. I can go into code. And there's another case, and the Windows is a little different. Windows uses the backslash, while Linux uses the forward slash. So there's again the dot slash popping up. This is a very technical skill where understanding how to work with the command line and what it means to have these slashes in specific ways can help you understand how even programming languages uses these slashes to go around the file system. Uh, boom, boom, boom. So much stuff over here. But anyway, and we can go to PHP. I think it was one Python. There we go. Now tab is great in the command prompt. Using that tab can help you basically get to certain directories much faster and cleaner without having to type everything out, obviously. But notice just how the directories are being populated, right? So iDrive slash, which is the root directory, code slash, which is the current or the previous code folder, and now we're in Python. No slash here, but we did have to include a slash in the actual ending here, right? So knowing that helps out a lot. Yeah, so source specifies or attaches external files like battle.js, but this command helps execute functions of external file, the main one. External file. Right. So in a way, if we go back to what we did with battle.js, yes, the function battle initiates our whole creation of the classes. Because in the end, unless we run battle, class doesn't get created, which is a good way to kind of start off a particular sub program because we're kind of building a bunch of little programs inside of a workbench. So I don't want to create class player unless I'm actually going to have that battle happen, which means there's memory that's going to be taken up to create all of these pieces here, including the attack. And then we have the class battle we have, right? So there's a lot of memory being used if we decided to run this as soon as the page starts. If this whole program was just a game like you were talking about before, making like a Pokemon clone, then yes, we can basically have player and battle pop up in the very beginning outside of the function, right? Remember the scopes we talked about. The scopes of a function really goes to the format of this. Nope. Yeah, okay, good. So we take this. The scope of battle function is right inside of here. Right? All of this stuff is inside of battle. That's kind of like, call it level one. Like an extra tab will kind of show you that organization. Everything that stays within this space between these curly braces is created inside and then destroyed when you leave. So once the program is done, battle gets destroyed, player gets destroyed, all of these variables get destroyed, and memory gets freed. This is a general sense. Now, it's not super important in JavaScript, but it's super important in C++ and Java. This is why I like to use JavaScript as a good sort of uh, guideline to because it's really very close to how like C++ and Java work, but it doesn't use all of the technicalities that make the difficulty of programming in C++ and Java exist. It's much simpler because memory management is done by the Chrome browser. We don't have to worry too much about when our objects get destroyed and when memory gets cleared. This is just a kind of automatic process that the Chrome browser will do. Sometimes it's efficient, sometimes it's not. But basically, this is the scope. This is called the scope. Think of like when you're looking through a telescope, right, or a microscope, you're only seeing that one little space at the end of that scope. You're not seeing everything around it, just that one part. And then when you open and remove that scope, now you see everything else. Well, that everything else or the global space is normally right up here at the very beginning in JavaScript when it's not inside of a function, when it's not inside of a for loop, even an if loop has a mini scope. When you create, like if you actually create a variable inside of the if loop, it gets destroyed when you leave the final curly brace. So consider that you create stuff in the beginning of the curly brace, wherever that ending curly brace is, that's where that stuff you created gets destroyed. However, the kind of workaround is creating something global. So if I wanted to basically have player one and player two be global and not be destroyed inside of this scope, the battle scope, right? So that's the battle scope. Then I would create player one up here. You can say let, right? Let player one equals this here, but that would also mean that I have to move the class out. I can't just create player one if it never was created. They kind of really do function based on a top-down basis. Player one currently is being created inside of this scope, right? So right now, player class is inside of battle function, but this won't work unless I move that class literally above the creation of player one in the global scope. But then that kind of restructures my code a lot. That would mean that I would have to move this outside and then create player one outside. And then we can have a globe scope, but a global scope, but there's no reason for this because we're really organizing our code to really just focus on battle being its own organized little space. And up here, of course, is the global, right? Anything that we create out here in this global scope. Normally in JavaScript, it's like the very left-leaning spot, the very first piece of area you can start writing without any tabs or anything. So anything that's created out here can be accessed inside other scopes. But if you create player one, player two inside, they get destroyed as soon as you leave the scope. And then player one out here would be equal to undefined. It just doesn't exist because it was destroyed on the exit of that particular space. So scope is super important for the case of organizing, knowing what can be accessed from what location based on literally tabs. This is why tabs are so important. And this is why that one video that I have here for the mystifying programming, I put this little image of why do we need tabs basically, and this guy's laughing like, why the hell do we need tabs? And the devs over here like, you retard. So scope is kind of like the undisclosed piece of important syntax that we should understand. But right now, we basically just have the battle scope. As soon as battle runs, we create the class of player, the battle scene itself. We create the actual players. If you don't recall, if you haven't been for the previous sessions on how objects and classes work, make sure to look through the playlist in the description so you can get an idea. This was literally the last stream we went over. And then and there's a lot of details because we discuss why I created a whole new battle class versus just making the battle inside of a single player. It has to do a lot with hacking and taking advantage of uh, certain things that have to be managed on a server versus a client. So a little bit there. And of course, we went over a lot of these. This was actually a very nice one, the ands and ors from last time, also in the previous stream. So cool, that's organized. This one, I can probably expand this. Like the key here is interesting. This is a super simple version of what I created on my website, fathomcomputing.com/dash. Have a little dashboard here. And up here, you'll see a little kind of input space. For G search, YT for search Google, hack map. Basically, these keywords give you some concepts. So I started off with just Google searching, and then I added in a little hack map where you can go to a specific website that shows you a global map that shows the current hacks happening on the net. And then I do also trading, so I have like the CNN Fear or Greed Index, and I do have a menu. So if I type in menu, nothing may seem to happen. But if I go to inspect in console, I have a bunch of other commands that I have in here. So there's the CNN fog command, Schiller ratio, the stock heat map, uh, Wall Street bets sentiment, stock whales, OTC fin. So I basically created my own little like command prompt space for shortcuts. While all we did was search YouTube, right? These two things we have here, or actually a couple of things. Google, YouTube, DuckDuckGo, and now I added the Yahoo Finance. I've already expanded this project to a much bigger set of details where I can even go to my Discord or there it is, Checkpoint Hack and Map. I used to do take lessons tutoring, but now they kind of took it down. Microsoft decided that having this nice place for learning online was taken down, which is why I made my own Patreon. So if you do need help further or need one-to-one, go to Super Scholar Chris MIA. And if you just want to support me, man, just to kind of work with me, have a direct connection, communicate. I have my Discord on here, which you can access as well. I have resources that I leave from our streams directly in the Discord. So consider just joining for free, a typical Patreon process. You can join for free and support me and help me grow. And you can also get the resources we go over in our actual streams so you can use them on your own or use them as a reference point. So it would be cool to see more people interested in improving their abilities and also getting in contact because I'm very happy to communicate, very happy to, as you can see, Aquagod over here is he's the main chat guy. So if you guys do want to chat, like it's right there. Ask any questions. I love to interact. I'm a teacher, right? I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for 15 years, so I absolutely love the interactions. I love the questions, even if it's I don't want to say there's dumb questions, but sometimes they can be, but I'll still answer them. I'll still give you some information and maybe help you form that question into a much more self-determined, self-expansive way. And maybe even if it's a question that I can stream a whole set of details to, definitely ask it, right? And then, like they say, if you have a question, there's a high chance somebody else will also have that question, especially as we grow our streams. It is, but not all of it. So if you go to, like, let's say if I go Patreon, this is me logged in already. If I go to a private window, you can join for free. You can join for free, or you can look at the membership options. So those are the two things, right? You can just join for free, join on my list, gain access to a lot of the collections, the tech stuff, because some of these things I put underneath. I you are the chat. Yes, you are. Well, we had Bishwa in here earlier. He was chatting it up a little, said hello and stuff, so that was cool. But yeah, some people like to talk, some people like to watch and listen. Like that's all up to you. Like that everyone's so different. And that's totally fine, you know. If you like to just lurk and learn, that's perfect. That's great. If you want to interact and chat, super awesome too. But you can join for free, or if you need actual help, like one-to-one tutoring, educational guidance, getting to like a personalize what you know and where we can go to improve what you know, then yeah, then you can do this the actual membership stuff. But when you join for free, you gain access to collections that I have in here. Some of the IT stuff is locked for just free members. Just to like, just join, and then you have access to a lot of these kind of concepts, right? So IT journal, market journal, academic journals, and resources. For now, most of it is open. I just want people to have access. In the future, I might literally just put it behind the join free wall. I guess that's the case, right? Just so I can, motivate people to join and interact more. But I appreciate your support. And access to the Discord is also available. Aquagod's in there, and he got the last set of code that we worked on. So today, then, so far we've organized Battle.js. I'm thinking about putting this in its own space. So parse input search. So far it only does one thing, but I kind of did show you that that can be expanded to a lot of different commands, right? Searching Udemy, searching YouTube, DuckDuckGo, even using Google Translate. How did I do that? Let me see. It's been a while since I used this. BG, hello. No. Okay, BG worked. So I did take Bulgarian, but I don't think, I think oh, they might have changed the get request up here. So auto, yeah, I have to adjust a little bit on some things. I haven't updated that in a long time. So it's the same factor that we went through last time with creating this get request in the URL using our JavaScript process. We have it in the case here. We're creating the get request here with the pluses. And then we return that get request in the search terms. And it really depends on what type of search we're doing. Google uses the Q equals. YouTube uses the search query equals. These are again variables that you put in the URL, right? And then Yahoo Finance is unique. It actually uses a type of directory structure. And all we're doing is at the end of each these equals, we add in the button click. Yeah, there it is. We add the search term. So search sites 0 is a reference to the 0 location for Google. And then at the end, we add plus the search terms that we gain from that parse input search that we parse with a for loop. So that's where we learned about for loops, basically how we can use for loops to structure strings together into a readable command by the URL get request. So, uh, kind of thinking I'm just gonna make this its own because we can use this now for a search, but we're gonna expand that probably in the future to do even more. So I'm gonna go into JS, create a new file, call this command.js because that's kind of the goal here is to increase this to more like a online command prompt. And what is a command prompt? Command prompt is your typical terminal. You press help and you get a bunch of different PowerShell. Oh gosh. You get a bunch of different options to access the computer directly. Get help. Oh, they don't have the original help? Huh. Well, basically, you can activate stuff like Chrome. Nope. Okay, Firefox. Nope. maybe I have to go into CD, whatever. I'm not gonna go too much. Maybe that's a whole session on its own using the command prompt. Oh, but I can do my Olamo run Mistral, so I can run my AI through my command prompt. So some commands like Olamo are universal, global, kind of thinking about that same scope process we were looking at earlier, where that scope is that Olama is runnable from any location on your desktop. And then I can ask, hey, how are you? And then there it is, typical AI response. Don't have feelings or emotions, yada, yada, yada. So I can run a lot of stuff through the command prompt. And it's good to know this skill because especially in Python, that's where you're really going to need it. So Python, and then here I can actually use Python code, in this case, just printing out a simple hello world, right? Or creating a loop. How do I go to, oh, shift, control, next line? No, maybe I can do it this one. No, I can't. I can, but I can't at the same time. And line? No. I can only do one command at a time. This is basically a very big reminiscence to like when you go to the console and you go to the page we were at, stream one, the console here. So this console here where I can basically look at certain variables in the program, right? Or running code from the console directly, like alert. Basically running one line at a time. The console is very super straightforward because it runs in your Chrome and just kind of sits there, and you can use it to analyze the current page. Careful with the use of that console because if you are logged into an account and you're playing with console, I don't want to say anything bad can happen, but in most cases, don't copy and paste anything online into your console because that's how people can get your cookies. And getting your cookies can get some pretty, sensitive stuff about like your stuff, your private browser login stuff. But in the end, running Python from this case right here, from the PowerShell, the command prompt, it basically ends up doing the same thing as me doing this sort of thing. So I can create like a variable. So x equals 5, and then y equals 10, and then I do x plus y, and then that's 15. X times y, that's 50. You get the idea, right? So you basically have that ability to do it right there. I know the dot code for opening VS code. Oh, that's fair. Code. Oh wait, hold on. I gotta leave. If you want to leave the console or the Python interpreter, that's what it's called. It's not a console. It's a Python interpreter. We just do quit. But code, yeah, you're right. Yeah. There we go. Code is a universal one too. You can run code directly from here. I thought I could run Firefox because last time I did that before. Oh God. But one case that you can actually run this is directly by like going to the place you want to do it. So I can go to the C drive and then go to my program files and then go to Chrome. No, was it program files? What's the other one? x86 and then Chrome. Where's my Chrome? BattleNet, Black Magic Design, Brave. Okay, let's go to Brave. And then I can open up Brave. Nope. Oh, okay, there's an update. If you press tab, it's so much nicer. I just basically press tab this whole time. Looks like, oh, it's a little bit messy now. The spacing's odd. So then the ampersand basically lets you open up applications in the background. So you don't take up the whole terminal to run it. If you don't put the ampersand there in the beginning, then it's going to actually take up the processing of this terminal and you can't use it until you close Brave down. So the ampersand just says, hey, open up the program files, Brave software, update, Brave update, exe. Oh, I'm actually doing the Brave update. What about just a regular Brave? Okay. Okay, we're getting there. I'm looking around, I'm looking around, I'm looking around. Tap, 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 tap. I don't want to do this one. Okay. Where is the actual Brave? So, that's the problem. I'm doing it blind. What would you do in order to get to that process and see what's going on? You change directory into there. So I'll go to C, meh, program files, Brave. Then I'll look around. Oh, there's only an update in here? That's weird. Install, download. Oh, well, that's the Brave updater, I guess. CD 1.7 or 1.3. Okay, there's the actual Brave software, but update. Yeah, I guess this is just the update. So anyway, you can run from the command prompt. Is it useful? Yeah, depends. If you're making batch files, absolutely. If you're making an actual file that reads and can automatically do these things in a specific like instruction set, yes. If you're trying to open up Brave, just look it up on the like your Windows, search, right? So it really depends on what you're doing here. Oh, but I do have other things. Let me go back to my, there we go. I have something called Nmap. Nmap is amazing. It's a piece of software you can install online for networking. And for this case, I can do an Nmap scan on 192.168.1.1. This is a whole section for networking, and I gotta let it run. Then 24. I gotta let it run multiple times. Quitting, failed to output about to 255. No, I'm not doing this right. It's basically a web scanner. I'm just not doing it right because I'm rushing and I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. But in the end, you can use this to scan for any machines on your network. So a lot of interesting tools from here. But in the end, way more powerful than a console on your browser. That's a cool little concept to comprehend there, right? So in the end, we're using the console here to actually access details for the page itself. There's a document, which is the page itself, but also keep in mind the keyword document is specific to just a page. We also have a keyword window for literally controlling the window itself. There's your alert function. There's a blur ability. You can manage the button click, which is what I've done. Actually, that's a function that exists that I created, right? Button click is in the whole window space. Because clicking your mouse is a not a page specific thing, it's a computer specific thing. That's why this is in the window space. You can close the window, you can open new tabs, you can redirect people to different locations, all kinds of stuff. And if you ever been to a website where you like they have a window that keeps popping up and it's like one of those brick rolled windows that just keeps going everywhere and you can't close it down. It's probably because somebody's messing with the window keyword. They're moving the window all over the place and they can detect when your mouse goes on top of your window to try and click X, and as soon as you get your mouse there, it just changes the XY coordinates to a whole different location. So if you want to troll people, it's the little window keyword to keep an eye out for. If you want to be, a programmer, then you don't need that. But you can do some pretty cool stuff from there. Just a reminder, as always, as we keep going, make sure to like and subscribe. I do a lot of these sort of in-depth details, not only in JavaScript. I'm full techie. I love networking. I love servers. I love PHP. I love Python, JavaScript. We go through a full ecosystem of how to use programming in a lot of different ways. Not just creating hello world, not just creating simple ideas. Today, we're actually going over connecting to an online system, like in this case, weather. Let me see. Weather API. First thing, if you want to access anything, you need a Weather API access. So I'm going to open up Weather API. Normally it's free. Many times it's free for, yeah, 1,000 API calls per day. So you can call Weather app 1,000 times in one day and you don't have to pay anything. Pay as you call. But if you're doing like a consistent application where you're like trying to constantly update once every second, right? To try and find the difference between this second, next second, try to like figure out which way a specific hurricane is going, then you'd probably need a lot more because that's one, if you do a API call once a second, that's already 60 in a minute, right? And you're going to already go over that particular case. Even if you do it once a minute, if you take a calculator to this, uh, that's 60 minutes times 24. You're already gonna go over the amount of API calls you can do in a full day, right? So you might have like a space in between, like 440 minutes where you can't call the API. So every API is different. This is the weather API, and this is going to be the first example that we leave our page, we leave our little workbench to access to access an online API. And then after this, in the future sessions, I'll show you how to create your own APIs with the data that you have. Uh, but in this case, we're using somebody else's data. They're keeping weather information from online radars and all kinds of stuff, which we can't really do because I don't have a radar. Do you have a weather radar? I don't think so. So we're using other people's data collection and accessing it. Uh, what is fast API? Well, I don't guess depends on the case. What did you see fast? Fast API? What is fast API? Is that a specific API? Let's see. If you're building CLI app to be used in the terminal instead of a web API, check your typer. Not sure what Fast API is unless it's in Friends open source project. Unless this is the one you're talking about. There's probably a lot of different things involving Fast API. If it's just for the case of the weather, a Fast API is basically letting you access their data every like millisecond if you need to for whatever research purposes you might want. So first thing is if you want to actually access, excuse me, the API data online, you can do a lot of stuff. You can do this. I think GG, what was it? League of Legends, GG, what was it called? op.gg. So op.gg API. Let's see if we can access that. Where do sites like OPGG get their game data from? Riot API. Okay, so then Riot has its own API. If you're like trying to make your own little um, get the data from the players and organize them, or even just get your own data, you can use Riot's API to access this, where you do the same thing we're about to do, but we're going to be doing it with weather because it's a bit more simple for now, and futuristically maybe expand into other APIs. So, what is fast? It's generally a term I heard many times for JS, like use fast API and all. Hmm. Hmm. Let's see. Let's see. Define fast API JS. Standard based. I guess maybe it's this one here. Let's see what this is about. Framework, high performance, easy to learn. No, it's its own framework. So what's the difference between APIs and frameworks? So APIs normally give you access to a particular set of data through a PHP server. And a framework is a set of code like for Node.js and Go that you import. So it's like a piece of code that you import, just like we're importing our own battle function with the class player and class battle and how our little battles like scene worked with this code and we imported it into our main page here, right? Well, it looks like this is a set of code that optimizes the way you access stuff online. So, Fast API is probably your fastest Python framework. Okay. Yeah, so this is a Python-based framework. Email validator. It's a whole set of tools. It's a whole set of tools that lets you access online APIs. And it probably has a list of websites that it can give. So you don't have to basically do everything by hand and code the URLs. Remember, when we accessed the Google search, we did this kind of like by hand. We had to create um, our own little URL grab. Remember, these are called get requests. So what I'm gonna do here is say list of get requests because there's get and post. We're gonna learn a lot more about the two differences when we make our own PHP server. So make sure to like and subscribe for the future sessions that we're gonna go into when we actually create our own server locally. And you can literally follow along and create it on your computer as well and then connect your JavaScript to your PHP server, and then maybe even connect Python to that server too. Like there's no limit to what you can do once you have like a server being the middleman for all of your languages communicating together. But this one is just a GET request. It's in the URL. So when we're thinking of fast APIs, most of the times, if you want to access like what we're going to do with the weather request, is we're going to access it from the URL. It's a very straightforward access through a GET request. Now, other APIs might have you go through POST. And we're not going to do that yet because we do want to understand what the differences are, how we can do that on our own server before we expand. But it looks like the Fast API is basically just a set of code, a framework, right? Right here, a framework or a set of code, a frame of code, library of code that you can import like this. And then you use somebody else's created code. They probably have a lot of algorithms in there built in for optimizing the actual requests. Maybe they have like a keep alive system where you can access it on a good interval without getting disconnected. There's a lot of things that can be optimized. We're just like literally doing one connection, grab some details, bring it back, and then access it. But in the overall case of things, we're only doing a get request. So Python might support get, post, and then a bunch of headers. We haven't even talked about PHP headers or HTML headers and how the actual communication starts between websites. We've only basically done, hey, load up a page on my local computer. But like, if you do PHP, imagine we're right here. We're only doing HTML. When we expand to PHP, remember HTML starts here, ends here, and this is all that HTML is. PHP basically exists up here. We don't have that ability yet because this is a HTML file. We'd have to change it to a PHP file. And that's it. That's all we have to do. HTML is still readable inside of a PHP file. That's why this is a little not coded right because it doesn't look like it's reading PHP. But when we're dealing with HTML, it's only within the brackets of the HTML document. PHP expands our capabilities by actually letting us talk to the computer and server before we make an HTML request, like, hey, bring the website. And PHP runs before that code actually like loads the HTML. So you can send information like IP address, header, all kinds of extra details that basically can, and the post request, that's actually an important factor here. Post is sent in here if we're making any requests to an online server. So the post is going to be something that PHP does, while the GET requests we've been doing with our URLs to Google and to YouTube and to the weather app we're about to build, well, those are done inside of the HTML document. So that's where PHP really does become a very powerful tool for us. Let me get some questions here. Hold on. Van, I want to learn React Native, but since JavaScript and React.js is a prerequisite and I have not touched those languages yet, do you have any recommendations link where I can learn step by step? Yeah, look in the description. The description, I have all the beginners set of code. So if you're learning anything related to Node.js, JavaScript, React.js, start with the beginner playlist in my description. We do these sessions live every day. So make sure to like and subscribe to keep in touch and basically keep up with what we're doing. We're running a project right now, so we're basically using JavaScript as our main language for now until we expand into further languages. But we've done stuff like loops, classes, objects, functions, all kinds of stuff. So make sure to like, subscribe, and go to the beginner playlist if you're kind of lost at this current video, because I have everything up to this point. We've coded everything up to this point in the beginner playlist in the description below. So if you need kind of a starting point, that's where you start. And then you can catch up with our streams. Like you can kind of look forward and see, hey, what's he doing today? Just to kind of see a good idea of what we're working on. But if you're still lost with a lot of the code, this is kind of like a beginner series of sessions that I'm doing, and we're gonna keep expanding into more and more advanced stuff. Yeah, yeah, it's a little bit. It depends on which one. Posts are complicated. Get requests we've already done. This is the get request. It's just the URL. It's a beginner set of detail because all we're doing is creating a URL that we normally use to go to a website. But instead of us typing it in for ourselves in a actual browser, we're typing it in through the JavaScript code. So that's why it's still a bit beginner for the case scenario we're using it. We're letting the browser connect to that server rather than us doing it manually, right? So there's that kind of like difference. We're just using a string, that's beginner, putting it in the window, that's beginner. So really those two lines of code make this case scenario happen, where we can go from website to website. It's when we get to a PHP and post that we're going to kind of like drop away from the beginner set of code and then go into more details. So Again, to go into the full details, just make sure you like, subscribe, and notifications so you can keep up with the sessions as we have them live. Any questions you may have, please do put them in chat or put them in the chat, the comments after the session is done, and I'll make sure to address them in the next session. These are going to be live office hours. I'm on here basically chilling with my programmers out there and taking questions, taking information, teaching for free. Like there's no paywall here, right? It's free to subscribe, it's free to like, it's all that stuff. And again, in the end, if you need more personal help, there are channels in Patreon that you can support me and or get help from. So as long as you know those details, I'm very happy just basically being online, talking with y'all, having fun, learning some programming, and then expanding on it. Okay, so button clicks fine, key press detect. Well, that's pretty straightforward. We'll keep that there. Now from here, I did a very small little session on the key press detect, basically like a keylogger inside of your browser. You can basically now, once you have it set up with the listen element, right, the key up listen element, you can set up a game. You can use, you can basically set a if key.code equals to A, you know, and then move, we don't have this, like if we're actually making a game, like move left equals true. And then you create yourself a game based on these cases, right? So this is how actually it might be a good way for the future to make an actual like snake game to see how we can use the keyboard controlling process and the listener to create a whole game out of it. But for now, that's just the idea. You can let the event listener listen to a keyboard reaction or key up in this case, and then create a function. Mine is key press detect, there it is. And then basically figure out which key is being pressed and act on it accordingly. So that was like a very kind of like what 20, 30-minute session that I had there just to add that in there. So some sessions are long, some sessions is short, and I think I'm gonna go for maybe another hour to set up this little fetch request we're going for now. But we're gonna focus here, button click. So let's now set up our little space for the weather. So Command R0. Of course, two lowercase, and I like to repeat myself for the case that we don't want to have uppercases. Weather. For now, we'll keep it simple, right? We do have to basically post a location at some point, but at least we have a command now, just like battle was a command, Yahoo Finance, DDG. And what does that do if you just came in? Basically, it just gives our little workbench the ability to access a set of code through text. So weather, boom. In this case, I don't have anything here, so let's put in opening weather, a little identifier so we know it works fine. File not file. Oh, right. Oh, still having that issue. Did I not save it? Hold on. Hold on. JS Battle.js stream one. Oh, right. I did that thing where I was talking about it and I modified it and yeah, that's fine now. I didn't quite finish it up. So whether, okay, battle. Okay, battle works. Weather. Oh, I put a space after weather. So, and computers are very, very specific. So if you even put a space that wasn't there before, it's not going to match as we want. Let me refresh the code. There we go. So opening weather. So always make sure you kind of have a step forward and make sure you say, hey, okay, it works now. Because it would suck if I had this space in the whole time and then I write a bunch of code and then I was like, why isn't it working? Why isn't it working? Because in the end, it's like, the press didn't work. The press didn't work. And then I have like 50 or 100 lines of code to try and figure out when it was really just adding a space. And that even doesn't work for whatever interesting reason. That should have worked. But regardless, make sure steps that you add work before moving on to long, long sets of code so you don't get confused as to where your error is. It's just an effective way of coding, so you don't have to basically, you know, fart around for an hour or 2 hours trying to debug why it's not working. So back to weather, right there. So I need to basically access this. I'm pretty sure I have an account already. I've done this before. One API, free. No payment. Please fill in. I don't think it was this one. Was it open weather? Let's see. Oh, sign in. Do I have an account? Hold on a minute. Time to figure some stuff out. Trying to log in, see what my credentials were, and if I can't remember. Oh, found it. Okay, we're good. There we go. So I have a free version, nothing crazy here. There's a dashboard, that's pretty fancy. But all I want is historical weather for any location, API keys. Okay, this is what we're looking for when we're dealing with accessing data online. You can't just freely access it. That would be nice, but people abuse that ability and then send 1,000 requests and DDoS a server. So many cases you need to create a key, which means that basically you just need a free key, right? Normally just to throttle the amount of times you can access it and just to safeguard a specific website from accessing certain things. That's it. So they know who you are, what account it's linked to, and that you're not malicious, and they can keep track of how many requests you make. If it's free, it's free. You don't have to worry about the key being anything specific. But then you can buy more advanced keys. You- It's not a big deal for us right now. But all we want is this. Then we need to figure out how to access it through the, let's see, API. So we're looking for the key and then the API documentation. Current weather data, how to make an API call. There it is. Boom. That's what we need. So that's the URL adjustment that we need. Now there is an issue, right? We got to do latitude and longitude. But there are other cases that we can plug in a not just coordinate, but a actual state or country. Let's see. So the kind of bare minimum is at least that I know what the app ID key would look like. So it's not going to be anything crazy. In fact, I'm probably just going to do it this way. I'm going to keep this there. And then I want to grab this. Uh, hmm. Yeah, I might have to do an async here. So there's a bit of a adjustment we have to make. We need to make a special function called an async function, which means that it's waiting for something, a synchronization process. When we reach out to the internet, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Our packets could get lost. The estimated time of 5 milliseconds to get the information might turn to 10 milliseconds or 1,000 milliseconds or like a minute or two based on the ping. So we do something called an async connection, which is basically a connection that stays open and waits. If we're ever doing, because most of this code here that we've done so far just runs as soon as it happens. That's the key. It just starts running and end of story. But we can't run certain things if we're waiting for information to come back to us. So our goal is to catch and have a connection between two locations, which is where like React, all of these um, libraries that you will access, you need to basically use this process to gather the data. Then not only do you tell this function it's an async, but we have to await for the fetch. This is where we throw in the URL. And then we got to let this return. We return the value after we await a fetch. Return just means when you basically use a function, you have to return it to its location. And we're going to do it here. So let weather equals get weather. Got to build it piece by piece, so kind of get an idea of what's happening here. So I'm going to do a log of weather just to see what the return data is. But in the end, the async function gives ability for us to use the await feature, which means go to this website, grab the details, but if you don't get it under a specific timeline, don't just keep running code. I'll wait for you to get those details, and once you get them, then return, then we can continue. Now the get weather, basically this line here awaits data, right? The get weather is a async function that awaits data, and we stop here until we get that data. And again, the internet is a chaotic place. It's not going to be as simple as, oh, okay, I'm going to the website, I got the details. It's going to be drop packets, it's going to be your Wi-Fi disconnecting. There's a lot of things that can happen that will increase the time from a typical get the information right away. So we use this async process, and every language has this, where we're waiting, we're hanging on line 83 until the data comes back. And once it comes back, it just saves itself to weather and then it goes through. So this line can wait for zero point 0.5 seconds to 10 minutes, depending on if you're connected by dial-up or internet potato, right? We all know dial-up and internet can be a little bit out of way, but I don't even think people are using dial-up anyway. So, but the idea still stands. It does, there's no time limit for us to wait. And then sometimes there are kind of like maybe 60 seconds maximum requests that are set up in the settings, but most times it's enough for us to work with it. Then we grab the API key. We put it in the get request. So app ID equals API key. Now, I'm not sure of any particular latitude and longitudes, but let's see. Mm. We do also want a JSON format. We don't want a XML. I prefer JSON. This is what JSON looks like. Cool, cool, cool. Latitude, longitude. Let's just use what they have here, right? Latitude. We'll use that as an example. Longitude. But there's also a way again to use like state and all that kind of stuff. So let's test it out for the first case scenario. Here then, what I want to do, so I'm going to look at console. So I'm printing it out fine. Okay. Should be enough for me to test it out. So, boom, boom, boom. There we go. Promise pending. And this is how those cases work. It's a promise that something is going to come back. And the cases that promises are interesting ideas in programming, where we promise something's going to happen, but many times it may not happen. Or the case that we wait until something is fulfilled because the promise has started, and we want to fulfill that promise, so we wait and wait and wait until there's a promise state called fulfilled, and then we know that we have a promise response. So now we basically got an object. This was the step-by-step process, right? We create the promise to get that response. We have a state type where it says pending, 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 and then fulfilled. And finally, it returns an object with the URL we set. And let's see what data we have in here. So text, let's see what the text says. No, nothing in here. Headers JSON, no. Sometimes we got to look around for the data being sent back, which means maybe it wasn't status okay. Oh, right. This is actually nice. We get to access a new location in our console. Not the console, well, the inspector. Not the current console. So elements is where HTML and CSS exists. Console is where JavaScript exists. And a network is where online interactions happen. So now we can look at the interactions we just had. Let me actually start popping this out and make a whole new window here because it's getting a little extra. There we go. Something like that. Okay, cool. So the 200 OK status means we connected. Response. Ooh, nice. There we go. I don't even know where we are, but we're making a request somewhere. Country? Italy? I guess we just grabbed Italy. And the response is where we can grab it from here. So this is actually what came back from. So this is the payload that we sent, latitude, longitude, and the API key, right? This is normally the case you want to do. If you're accessing data online, you have an API key you have to send so they can verify you and your account, like a login. So technically, yeah, you can use my login, but I don't use that much other than for this example. And I have other accounts that I don't show you guys. So it's a test account. It's a test account that has nothing on it. But reality is I'm just using the free access, right? And I'm giving it specifics that I'm looking for. So the 44.34 access value of the latitude and the 10.99 longitude. This is what we're sending as a payload, and then we're getting data back. Now we're getting data as a JSON file. This is what a JSON file looks like, right? Boom, 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 boom. Now, problem is my fetch is, I think, a little bit too simple. We did get some values back. This is really what the JSON looks like in text form. This is just kind of a nice preview where we can open and close, yada yada. But now, let me see. My console, I have to find where it's at. Let me see where that stuff is. In fact, I could probably look at the IT. No. Let me see. JSON prototype, no. Response, search for response. It's somewhere in here. Is a piece of, the body? Readable stream. No. Status okay, cores. Now it's a case of finding out where that data is, though. That's the problem. There's a lot of different ways. This is like maybe the most difficult way to do it. There's like an Ajax function that simplifies things for us. Mm, length one, JSON name, scopes, no. URL types, datas, okay, header, body, get body, body used. What else was in here? How about, let's look for wind. No, it's not in there. Interesting. So maybe it's not carrying the data, which is let weather, console weather. Can I do console weather dot response? In fact, let's do it this way. I'm gonna do this manually so I can have more access to stuff. So I'm gonna call get weather. And in fact, I'm gonna do let weather2 equals to get weather. Weather2. The response was fulfilled. Okay. Now, is there no way to access weather2 dot response? No. Let's see. It's hidden in there somewhere. So let me see. Fetch response JSON. JSON method response JSON promise. So we get the promise. Fetched. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. There was a process we had to go through. So we've only fetched the data. We got to parse it as well. Otherwise, it comes back to us, but we don't do anything with it. So we do a little connection factor. We response, or we get the fetch, but then we got to take that response and parse it through JSON function. Forget about that one. So let's do this so we can simplify this a little bit. The URL, URL API or API URL. Here it is. So we fetch from the API URL, and then we connect to the next step. So it's going to run the fetch, it's going to wait, it's going to do its thing to grab data. Then we run something else after we grab that data. We got to grab the response. Here's kind of an interesting way that JavaScript uses shortcut functions. In Python, they're called lambdas. In JavaScript, it's just kind of a shortcut function without a name, too. So it's an interesting one. Basically, it looks like this. Boom, boom. So what does a function generally look like? We'll notice the curly brace, or sorry, the regular braces here, the brackets, the curly, smooth brackets, parentheses. Darn it, so many names for these things. And then after that is the curly brace. Well, we're kind of replicating this, and we're stating, here's the input, and then it points to the block of code, right? So that's the key. Now the response is a specific input. We can probably do RSP, resp for response. Then we got to convert it. So resp.json, convert it into JSON. Because right now, here's the kind of kicker. when we're accessing data online, we're actually gaining back a string. So that the network we saw here, we're gaining back a string. This is an unformatted, simple string that gets past the zeros and one text through the networking cables, right? But in order for the program to use it, for our JavaScript to read this appropriately, it needs to convert it into like a list. Remember the lists we have up here, like a search site. This isn't a typical piece of text. This converts itself into what JSON would organize into a list of indexes, right? So it's a specific data type in JavaScript. But we can't send data types through the net, through the internet. Only text can be passed through cables. This is actually the best case scenario because what we can do now is this JSON format that we have here, not only can JavaScript read it and then convert it into an actual data set for JavaScript to use, but I can recreate this whole application in Python, and then Python has its own JSON converter too, encode and decode. So basically, every single language can read JSON, which basically means that, yeah, this is a case scenario for just taking text from an online source and then converting it to the local language that we choose to use, C++, Java, JavaScript, and so on and so forth. But this is really where we do stop because now we got to learn more about JSON. And in this case scenario, it's a very straightforward link in detail. Well, I'm not going to stop just yet, actually. I want to at least grab that info and put it on my page. So let's go back to, we'll have to do a lot more organization of the data that we are just accessing. But for now, so we get the conversion to JSON and then finally data and print the data somewhere. So then at the end here, dot then, and we can also do this, I believe, in a entered space. Can I do it this way? Yeah, I think I should be able to do it this way. So the data that we get, is there a return? Response JSON converted, then I guess it automatically goes in there. So the response JSON, this part here, turns into data for the next then link. This is kind of like a run this and then run this and then run this, but make sure to pass down the variables each time, like an automatic return process. So then here, data to the next shortcut function, I should now be able to console.log and print the data out. So at least in the simplest form that we can get data online before we go into much more complex ideas is like this. Get weather, return fetch, da da da. Log weather, let me move this off. That should really work. Be missing something. Oh, opening weather. So it should really print stuff. 96 data console log. I might be, oh, yeah. I might be missing something. Hold on. Can I actually just console log the one before it? I don't think I need so many den connections. Hold on. Probably just console.log this response as a JSON and not have to deal with this. Because it's kind of like a tool that you can keep on moving and formatting the JSON to fit your page's format. But all I want to do is just print out the raw data for now. Promise pending. Fulfilled. So now it's actually doing it still from this. Okay. So maybe I do need that next layer. Gosh, I forgot how to work with these. Const list item document current. Yeah, see then for the product of data dot products. Data. This depends on where we're going from. Products.json, fine. They're using their own local little JSON file. They're not accessing an online process. So that's the difference here. We format JSON completely differently based on the source of where we're getting data from. That's why it's important to know maybe more about the API, which means that we probably got to go into more detail next time and learn this API. But here's the kind of the kicker. We're essentially done. with the 15% of the process. You now know what fetch does. That's very important. But fetch, wherever that went, over here, fetch adjusts based on the API. Fetch adjusts based on the other person that created their whole database based on their own preferences and their own security processes and preferences, yada yada. But fetch is that little thing, that little function in a lot of languages that just reaches out to an online server. That's the 15%. That's what we need to know in order to understand, all right, what's an async function? Why do I have a wait here? Well, I have a wait because fetches on an online basis, they may not succeed in the first 10 milliseconds, or even in the first second, or 5 or 10 seconds. We don't know when this data is going to return to us, so we need a form of a waiting process to say, hey, before you run other code, wait for this data to come by or come back to us, right? So that's a typical 15% understanding. Now, the 85% that we always talk about on this channel is, well, we got to learn the API from Open Weather Map. See how they organize their JavaScript, their JSON, their details of like how and what to look for inside of the data. Looking back at network, the weather call here. I can at least see it, like I can see it from the response on the network itself. But now I gotta figure out where this data is. I gotta convert it properly, and that might be a whole section on its own. We have not used API key. Yeah, we did right here. This is the API key right here. The API key C0 yada yada yada. This is at least the one on mine. So if you wanted to basically make your own access key, you can do it. And I have no problem showing this because I'm not like I don't have like 1,000 people in stream that are gonna make my API call and like what is the word? uh, break my API key because of requests. So I don't mind showing mine. But in the end, the API key is being used in the get header here, and it's based on this variable. So what happens here is we have a couple of variables, right? First, we go to the apiweather.com. In fact, let me do this. This is a good important place to analyze here for how APIs work. First, we go to the URL that holds the API. And then they have a little bit of an organization. You're going to the data folder and the version of their API 2.5, and then they have a little access point. This is where the PHP is getting the information. Well, not only are we basically loading something called weather, remember how in our command prompt I was trying to run something by going to C slash program files and then Chrome or Brave and then Brave Updater. Basically, this is the same thing that we're accessing, but on a server that's outside of our computer. This is an important factor. It's kind of like understanding directory structures, but now on a server. Instead, we're not on my computer, C drive. We are on the openweatherapi.org or openweathermap.org, right? That's the big difference. Instead of C drive, we're in this location here. And that's the rest of it, though, like the rest of the part here, is very similar to what's happening after the data, the 2.5, the weather, and then that last file before like when the slashes basically end. This is the very last slash right here. This slash is the last folder, and then it calls on this weather. Now, that's not going to tell you what weather is because there's no file extension, but normally this is weather.php. So this is a PHP access point. And then it goes question mark. What's the question mark for? That's a very important part. It's now separating as a divider to the variables. You can give variables to that page in the PHP, right? So one of those variables is latitude, lat equals to 44, etc. You have a longitude equals to the 10, right? And then there's the app ID, and this is our API token. So it basically takes this. Notice what the spacing is. Notice that the space between variables is an ampersand. Think of it like a URL comma. Can't really put a comma in there, but This is the comma that is accepted in the URL factor. So lat equals 44.34. That's the first section, comma, right? Comma. And then long equals to 10.99, and then another comma, right? And then app ID. And basically for every variable you are sending, keeping in mind, this is what we call a GET request, all capitals, which is different from a post. So the GET request is done through URL, which is not a best, very secure request because you're not going to send login information from a user in a URL that can be easily readable by someone sniffing your network, right? It's not encrypted. This is like the most unsecure way to do stuff. But if we're just accessing an API for weather data, is that privacy really that crazy? Oh wow, they can now see what weather it is in the area. Well, yeah, kind of, maybe. Maybe you're looking for your local area nearby, and then they can figure out your longitude and latitude based on literally your API call. So there is some form of a very loose privacy issue, but what if you're like looking up weather in like Turkey or China, whatever? Then it doesn't matter. But all of this is a GET request and it is visible to anyone sniffing your network, especially if you're like at a cafe, Starbucks, and you're sharing Wi-Fi. That stuff doesn't get encrypted. How you doing, Jalaluddin? Welcome in. That actually rhymed. How you doing, Jalaluddin? Welcome, welcome. So this is the API access point, right? The API URL is just a URL that gives us the location of where we're starting. Where is our particular access entry point? And then we do have like the directories, data 2.5, weather, so on and so forth. And then the actual variables that is being activated by the question mark. That question mark is where is like, all right, this is the file we're accessing, and here are the variables that we are attaching to this request. An ampersand is a comma of sorts. Good evening. Yes, I'm doing good. Good to hear, bro. Good to hear. You caught us at the end, but what are you doing? What kind of programming are you doing? And what kind of interests do you have? Because I always like to talk and chat and see everyone's perspective on programming. And any questions at this point? I'm kind of calling it for here, but if you do have any questions, please do put them in chat. And if you just are, if you're not here live, always feel free to put them in comments because I'll be reading all comments. I go through all the details and answer questions from comments, from chat. So make your voice heard and your questions known. Other than that, like and subscribe for more content. Currently, we're working on a workbench, which is a JavaScript based workbench. I'm calling it Stream 1 because why not Stream 1? And we've done a couple of things. We're learning the basics of programming, but in JavaScript, which I call the first 15%, which is basically variables like we see here in an array list, functions being created to listen to keyboards, uh, button click functions that activate based on what we're trying to do in an input. So we're creating a nice little portfolio item, very good to have in anyone's little programming process to basically have your own set of code. Yes, I'm basically in second year of college. My course is Bachelor's Technology Computer Science. Nice. I was doing computer science. That stuff is absolutely ridiculous. Wait till you get to sorting, which you probably already have. Wait till you get to creating your own programming language. That's one of those things too. We do go through discrete stuff. Um, where was the battle? Right here. So we did some and or combination factors. Maybe you had some discrete mathematics in your class, in the computer science class. This would help out. But yeah, so my streams are basically very interactive as best as I can, like, kind of program and chat with the people in stream. But in the end, I'm essentially working with a general little project here. It's in JavaScript, which is actually becoming a super huge like language. I don't know if you know what this is. This is called a little flipper. And I've literally have like interesting like I don't know if you can see it, but there's like literally a Java oh no, horrible. There's like JavaScript files in my flipper. They recently I'm confused why they didn't do Python, but maybe because JavaScript is a little bit lighter. Um, and I feel like basically we can program flippers with JavaScript now, which is insane. We can run and access little pin numbers at the top there and connect ourselves to a bunch of stuff. Um, and then use JavaScript to control our frequency, RFIDs, Wi-Fi, sub-gigahertz, a lot of cool stuff. So I've been really playing with the Flipper's JavaScript capabilities. Been wanting to go deeper into it. They're pretty fun. Yeah, dude. It's a pretty cool little device. I love it. And I have like a whole set of. I've been wanting to go into hardware as a computer science guy. It's very difficult to transition to hardware, believe it or not, because the computer science subject is very much on logic, mathematics, organization. And when you're thinking like computer engineering, you're doing a lot of like physical hardware adjustments. The most I've done is actually had a teeny tiny IBM where I unsoldered from the board the USB because it was one of those old USBs that had like four little pins in there and they would settle on the USB. But at some point I maybe fucked up and it just like bent my pins in and I couldn't use that port anymore. So like I had to replace the USB, get a new one that's like a nice flat plastic and resolder it back in. That's the most I've done in the hardware space. But this was like a yeah, we can program it with JavaScript now. Normally it was a C++ based language, but now they've included a type of like conversion where you can use JavaScript inside and access the hardware. So I guess they made like a C++ port, a way for the Flipper Zero to communicate with JavaScript and using that code to activate C++ functions, which is pretty freaking sick, to be honest. Considering JavaScript like literally is becoming one of the most used languages everywhere. You see it everywhere. I mean, on my Linux machine, I have little desktop widgets, and they're basically HTML and JavaScript too. Everything's becoming JavaScript. All there needs to be is like a converter. Just like when you created your own programming language, somebody else created like a conversion from JavaScript into the local language. Yeah, so, starting with JavaScript is like one of the best things I've ever considered. Well, I actually started with C++ plus plus and Java, but then my third language was JavaScript. But starting teaching people programming in JavaScript is a super universal way to begin. Because yeah, you can start with Python, but Python's a little bit more spacey. It's a lot more strict on the tabs. And the way it's formatted, it's a little bit foreign to a lot of students that come from like C++ plus plus beginners and Java beginners. So that's why JavaScript is a very good kind of like process to get inherently into the programming world. And then from JavaScript, you can go into other languages like Python or Lua. Python and Lua are actually very close together. I used to do some Roblox programming in the past and teaching students how to program using Lua, which is pretty cool. How to basically attach code to 3D objects. So that's always fun. But I've always been more of like the logical programmer, the back-end programmer. I couldn't make a whole game on my own because of all the like 3D designs and the processes and just it's not fun for me. I just like to code. I like to make all the back-end logic make sense, which is interesting because a lot of other people struggle with the logic and they love to create worlds in the 3D world. So let's see, Command.js is its own space, stream. So we learned a little bit about how to organize our files now. Stream one in this section, or in this session, we took some, well, actually, this is here now. I gotta put the comment where it's supposed to be. We took our battle class object scene, put it in their own little organized spaces. Uh, Command for accessing online, basically making a shortcut to Googling and YouTubing. Now we have this very quick sort of like get weather function to access online content. And since you just came in, SS, we're essentially going into a lot more, or at least depending on how much you know, because I'm sure you probably already know a ton of the first 15%. What language did you use or you're currently using in your computer science course? Because you probably already know plenty of the cases that we're doing here. But For reference, they don't really teach you a lot of applicable stuff like how to use your knowledge of coding to access online resources, parsing data online. And this is what we did today. We basically used a fetch in JavaScript to access a website for weather. And we created a little API call with get. We had to do some processes here, and it's not completely done yet, but it's going to be a lot more to the session because we got to go over how to parse JSON, and we haven't quite done a session specifically on JSON yet. But we can start right now in a very summarized way that JSON is a universal format where all languages can read JSON. It's just a data structure. If you go online, go to JSON lint, and you basically get a decent, kind of trying to figure out how to work JSON. It's basically, in fact, I'll just grab it from that request that we just had. You can always try and create your own JSON set, but all it is a type of, uh, what's the word? A data set of key value pairs. So a dictionary in Python, or a key value pair in every other language that exists, right? An array of a key for the index and a value to correlate to that index. So the only thing that's very interesting here is that when you're sending these packets of JSON, right? So there's your key, there's your value, but then inside of that value is also another set of key value, right? So that kind of works in its own. And you can kind of condense these to see all the keys that are available to us in that particular request that we just did. But one thing we don't quite get to see is that this JSON file actually, when we get it on the computer, it's not quite visible to us yet, but once we access it, the whole file is basically stored in a regular index. So in order for us to access one of the inside values, like a coordinate, we'd have to do something like, let's say we save this JSON file to JSON response, then we go to the 0 index, and then we go to coordinate. So this is one of the access points we can use in order to access that file. But we gotta really go into a lot more detail based on that JSON system, which is a whole session on its own. And this is a good place to kind of call it and be done because I do got to do some stuff. I got to go hang out with some friends, watch some sports, even though I'm not a sports guy, but I prefer just to hang out with friends more than anything. Because I'm always in this tiny room programming and teaching. Teaching and programming my life away, which honestly is what gives me satisfaction. If I can teach one person with any of the videos I've created, I feel fulfilled that the whole video is worth something. You got to consider, I do like one-to-one tutoring, right? So I spend an hour to teach one student one-to-one with questions asked in between and kind of getting them to understand. But that 1 hour can now be recorded online and people can watch it at the comfort of their own home. So it's not even just one person that I'm helping, it's people like jumping in. Today we had a maximum of 12 people come in, right? So that's 12 people that have benefited from this stream that normally I would have 1 hour session with somebody to teach them one on one. So it's a lot more like gratifying for myself because I can help more people at once on these streams, which is why I like streaming, which is why you guys should like and subscribe if you haven't already. Join in, notifications up so you know when I'm streaming so you can ask any further questions. We do a lot of stuff, not just JavaScript, we do Python, we'll do PHP next. Because this actually, once we get to the coordinates, once we get through this JSON format that we're looking through, we're going to create our own API with PHP that we can access ourselves. So we're going to be able to return information based on that, which is kind of the first step to creating a login database, to creating like a YouTube-based website, which is using PHP as the server manager or the server coding language. And then we create our own personal API. We can tokenize it for security. We can create our own API key, all kinds of stuff. But that's the next steps further into a more advanced area for sure. There is still kind of like a beginning for PHP, so we'll kind of consider it beginners because we're going to be learning about variables again, but just how PHP uses them. We'll be learning how loops work in there. And because PHP is on a server, it actually acts as our programmer. The PHP will code for us the HTML file that we return to the user on their client, which is weird. It's weird. It's like you have your own automated server, like literally, or like a cook, a chef. Your PHP is your chef. He's cooking up the HTML page locally on the server, and then when he sends that file to the client, all they see is just an HTML file, but it was generated by a set of PHP logic. So that's where we can let people have access to like admin consoles, have access to specific places in the database, have access to their own user settings instead of someone else's user settings, all that kind of stuff. So PHP is actually super fun. I'm super excited to get to that point because we have been doing JavaScript for a bit. And make sure you do go to the description and click on any of the beginner values there, links in the playlist, because that's where I have all of the prerequisites to this session that we had today. That's where we go over everything from the beginning of this workbench. This workbench is going to continue to expand and potentially turn into a PHP workbench, which is going to be super exciting. But I do have also other PHP based um, videos available too. So you're always able to essentially go forward with PHP template creation, where you can go and look how I change HTML templates that are free online, and you can PHPify them, which basically means, yeah, that template you got online has a login page, but it doesn't work. It's just HTML. And you learn how to essentially attach a login PHP function to that downloaded template. This is why anyone can really just create a template online. It's really easy to just make a nice visual template, but it's a lot more difficult to actually program it to work. So that's why you'll see so many free templates all over the internet. But when it comes to like, hey, how come I can't use this template to actually log into something? Well, it's because somebody created a visual shell that doesn't actually have any mechanics to it, and it doesn't generally actually connect. I try to stream every day. Sometimes I'll stream every other day, but at least 3 times a week. So I stream pretty often, especially in the coding subjects. I try to stream every day, but because I have students and I have times that like I'm like burnt out from teaching, so sometimes I have like days off, you know. So call it minimally 3 times a week. Yeah, fair enough. Thanks for joining, bud. Super glad you're here. Super happy to see more people in computer science. I'm gonna tell you, computer science is a great subject because it doesn't just teach you like computers or science or programming. It's like a way of life, to be honest. It's a logical observation, and it's kind of helped me really like computer science is the format of optimizing a way a program works to do more with less. And then you have that mindset and you look at the world around you and you're like, why is everything so fucking unoptimized? Why is everything, why do we have politicians? Why do we have 5 middlemen between Visa and Steam to cause issues with our payment systems so they can now control what we buy? Like, there's these kind of observations. You're like, we can make this world way more efficient if we just remove all the fucking middlemen. So, like, I go into some interesting rants sometimes on streams. So, we'll be happy to have specific streams for current events too. I like to do some current event streams once in a while when things get crazy. Or at least I put them in videos, so they're more aware. The video content is a bit more towards like what's happening in the world, with potentially a couple of, you know, condensed versions of my stream so everyone can look at it. Yes, fair. I mean, I can talk to you about computer science all day, but I'm glad I motivated you. No, it's a whole different way of thinking. I guess it's some people it might look like a little robotic, but when you really think about it, I've always noticed that Windows especially has gotten less and less efficient because we've depended on the higher and higher levels of hardware. gigabytes of RAM, gigahertz of so many freaking processors with 32 freaking cores inside. But when I look at Linux, they've always been functioning perfectly fine because Linux people are way more nerdy and they love to tinker with the computer science of things. They love to make shit like way more efficient. They want to make that software work on like a fridge or like a watch. If they probably have Linux versions for like the Apple Watch. Like they want to make everything run on Linux basically. They're so freaking nerdy. So they look for ways to make things so efficient that you start noticing why did these nerds make things that work on a computer 20 years ago, but Windows can't install on anything more than like 2 or 3 years ago? Like then you start thinking about it, like these Windows people really don't know what they're doing, do they? Or they just don't care, and they're depending on hardware and us to buy shit over and over again. And that's probably the case, because you think a little bit about planned obsolescence. They don't care. They'll force us to buy new hardware all the time just to make more money. But drop into the Linux world, man. It gets pretty cool. It gets pretty cool. Super nerdy. Anyway, super glad to have all of you here, joining in, asking questions, chilling with me. And yeah, like, subscribe, hit the notifications if you want to keep up with my streams, because I do kind of randomly pop in and out once in a while. I mean, again, 3 times a week is what I aim for. So you will be seeing me for that much, but there's no like schedule yet. In the future, I'm hoping to make a nice schedule to organize myself. But right now, I still work, I still do things on the outside, so I got to maintain kind of a balance of life and stream. So the best way to keep in touch with live streams is to hit the notification so you know when I'm going live and we can go into details. Oh no, Tama, I'm so sorry. Don't cry. Don't cry, don't cry. Turn the notifications on, man. Was it too late for you? I'm also not sure on what time to stream so I can get like the optimum audience. So like go into my posts that I have on YouTube and kind of put in your time. I have a post, let me see, I have a post on my profile here that kind of asks everyone like what the ideal time for them is, and I think it's a voting thing. Let me see if I put it as a voting thing. And I also wanted to play Cards Against Humanities. Yeah, there we go. So, generally speaking, if you want to kind of like give me a little bit of a hint when is the best time for you, I will try to like this is kind of where I'm trying to organize myself. I don't know when to stream exactly. I kind of pop in when I pop in. But if you want to influence kind of the future of the stream, vote on this to give an idea of where I can place myself. Because I want to grab as many people as I can on my streams. It's just the most effective way, right? Computer science efficiency. So if I don't have any idea, I just pop in when I pop in. But if you go and vote on it, then you can get a bit of an influence to basically say, hey, get on it this time, please. And I'll try and accommodate as many people as I can based on universal time zones. Because I do have people from the UK, from India, from the US. That's going to be a difficult one. I mean, just having like literally all time zones. I think the best option for all time zones is like around like Europe's evening. No, because that'll be India's night. I think at Europe's afternoon, because then that'll be the US morning and India's evening, so I can kind of grab a. You see why I don't have a time schedule yet? So go vote on it. Tell me what your time is good for dropping into the stream. Leave your feedback there so you can influence when I go live. And that's it for now. Next time we go into JSON, and after that we go into PHP and make our own servers locally and communicate with our webpage and our server and kinda really get to see how APIs work from the server side. Anyway, hey, you can always rewind, by the way, Tama. You can always watch it from the start, right? We're still here. There's a good amount of questions in there. So, once the stream ends, just kind of play it again. You'll see what we did today. We did a lot on fetching information from an online server, but now it's more like, hey, we're getting some data from the weather station. How do I process this data and show it on the page? So we got a couple of layers to peel apart next time for the JSON process. But we did fulfill the case for fetching from an API online, and you can fetch from a lot of different places. Yep, yep, yep. Alrighty. Well, thanks for joining for everyone here. Like, subscribe if you haven't already, and notifications up so you know when I'm on so you don't miss it like Tama did.